The Louisville offense needs to make it a point of emphasis to find ways to get Jamari Johnson and Mark Redman the football each and every week.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Card Nation, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into this Monday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. I want to take this time to personally thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, Locked On Louisville, free and available on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. Today's episode of the show brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off of your first order. Joining us for basically becoming a weekly spot now, Keith Artuoff, producer Keith, as the locals know him to be. He produces from the Pink Seats podcast over at the State of Louisville, basically on-air talent. Let's call it how it is, Keith. What's going on, man?
Oh, enjoying a nice Victory Monday.
Victory Monday. It was up and down. But I think one thing that Keith and I will both agree on, which has sort of become a talking point across the Louisville fan base, is tight end play needs to be utilized more by this offense. Jamari Johnson, Mark Redman. We'll get into Louisville still not being able to defend the mobile quarterback, and then we'll kind of talk about play calling, because that has been a major focal point of discussion over the past month or so. Keith, Jamari Johnson, play out of the Chiefs playbook Jeff Brom alluded to in his press conference. Jamari Johnson was alone by himself in Charlottesville in the back of the end zone. And thankfully, Tyler Shuck found him in the back of that end zone, because it looked like that window was kind of minimalizing, but still nonetheless go ahead touchdown play. Louisville's tight ends are showing up when their numbers are called, speaking more so of Jamari and Mark Redman. But also you're seeing Jamari Johnson be so critical in the run block game, and same with Redmond as well. Do you also agree that it needs to be a focal point weekly to get Johnson and Redmond the football?
I do, but I feel like this coaching staff is going to have to come up with creative ways to do it. I feel like a lot of fans are frustrated, like, get him the ball more, get him the ball more. Well, in a lot of the passing designs and concepts, because of certain deficiencies at other positions, you're having to keep the tight ends in for max protection looks, or they're having to stay and hit a little bit of a chip block a little bit longer than normal. So by the time they get out onto their route, they're behind the play and Shuck's already looking somewhere else to try and make something happen. So it's a bit of suffering from success, because you also mentioned how good of a blocker Jamari Johnson has been. So when you have a dynamic talent like Isaac Brown in the backfield, and you have a guy like Jamari Johnson who can get out there and block for him, you want to utilize them in those capacities as well. So it's the annoying gambit you run when you have a strong tight end room, but with question marks at certain positions on the offensive line.
Do you think that, now, granted, you do mention offensive line play that has been struggling, especially on the boundaries. You have two really promising freshman running backs that got the lion's share of the carries on Saturday, but they aren't necessarily all that great in pass pro yet. I think that comes with, just getting the physicality and the body transformed and add a little bit more strength to it, which hopefully comes down the line for both Isaac Brown and Duke Watson. Do you think that for Louisville to maybe try to then utilize tight end play more, that you're going to see multiple tight end sets more often in the future?
Yeah, I could see 21 personnel becoming something more that this staff likes to use. Maybe get some like ace formation looks where you have Redmond and Johnson both on the field, especially with how shallow the depth is at wide receiver. Once you get past the top of the depth chart, you really aren't seeing the dynamic playmaking ability that we expected from some players like Bell and like Colin Lacey, who's still coming back from an injury. So I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt there. So you could afford to maybe give them some rest on snaps to get some ace formation looks. And because this is a pro style scheme, you can still run the ball out of Ace, and both of those two tight ends are capable blockers as well. So I would like to see that. It'd be a nice mid-season twist to add to the playbook. So something new that opposing teams have to try and scout and be ready for, just to hinder their game time prep coming into games, because we're getting ready to go into a pretty tough stretch on the schedule.
Louisville's 6 games into the season, and through the first 6 games, it looks like they have utilized tight end play more last year when they didn't have the numbers, to now I think Jamari and Mark Redman have a combined 19 catches on the season. And it looked like, or it seemed like, with a prototypical Jeff Brom offense, tight end is a huge focal point. At Purdue, at Western Kentucky, a lot of fans thought with the upgrade of the room that we were going to see them featured more so as pass catchers. Do you think that I feel like there's no simple answer here. I feel like, you have to feed the targets to Ja'Cory Brooks and now Colin Lacey. You're still trying to run the football, but your offensive line wasn't as successful. It hasn't been as successful this season as it was last year. And I think, honestly, you're playing some better teams than you did last year as well.
And now I don't have any stats in front of me to back me up on this, but I could be completely wrong on this, but it feels like we just haven't had as much possession of the ball this season either. Like, we've had a lot of drives that either short fields or home run plays, like going back to, well, first off, your first 2 games of the year, you're only playing your starters 2 or 3 quarters at most. That's in those right. First 2 games. Then against Georgia Tech ran a lot and tried to smother the ball and limit possessions. Notre Dame also run the ball, limit possessions, control the clock. SMU, they had some home run plays, but they also had some long drives where it was just constantly like get to 3rd and 2, convert, dominate time of possession. And same with Virginia. Like, they won the time of possession battle in that game. And I feel like this is just very vibes-based analysis, not very official, but it feels like
that's all we do on this show. Vibes-based analysis, no stats, only vibes.
So it feels like we just haven't had the ball long enough to distribute it as much as I feel like a lot of the fan base would like us to.
You want me to tell you? I'm looking at the stats here. Take a guess. So out of 60 minutes or so, what would you say the split was? I'm looking at the time of possession here.
For the Virginia game?
Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing Virginia probably 35 to 25.
So 34-44 to 25-16. So you were pretty damn close. Virginia had a lot of the ball, especially like Louisville went up 17-7, and then the offense stalled out. And yeah, they had that one play where the receiver clearly had the first down, and then ACC rep said, "No, he didn't." It's becoming the running joke for those that don't know what we're talking about. But I look at this next portion of games, 6 games in total. You face some fairly good defensive lines. Miami's coming up on Saturday. You've got at Clemson, which scares the hell out of me. And then you've got Kentucky. And no matter how bad the offense might be for them, that defense, I don't even want to think about it. Keith, looking at tight end play moving forward, you could sort of look at this one of 2 ways. One way you could say, well, Jeff Brom's made a point of emphasis to go out and say that the vertical routes haven't really been utilized a ton because we don't think that the pressure can hold up. So maybe that leads to more tight end play over the middle. Jamari Johnson screens out wide because we do know that he has that athleticism to be able to make plays out in space, but also to play the devil's advocate, you could suggest, well, you're going up against better defensive lines. You have to be more creative with pass pro and defending the run as well. So what kind of camp are you sitting in right now as you sort of gauge how involved tight end play is going to be in the receiving game moving forward through these next 6 games?
It's sort of one of those tricky things because there's valid arguments and concerns on both sides of this metaphorical aisle. It depends on matchups as well. Like, honestly, if we can get out to leads early and we can just squeeze the life out of the ball against a team like a Miami or a Clemson, then yeah, sorry, Jamari, sorry, Redmond, you're not getting any targets if squeezing the life out of the ball and running it is what wins. Because at the end of the day, that's what the goal is. Do I think we will have to air it out more to beat some teams like that? Yes, because Clemson's defensive line, Miami's defensive line, both just filled to burst with 4 and 5-star talent on the 2 deep and the third stringers as well. So I don't think those are going to be teams that we can just go up and bully in the trenches. My hope is we have a lot of the creativity in the playbook saved for 2 out of our next 3 games to try and scheme our way into some victories against teams that, at least on paper, are far more talented. So if that's maybe some chip outs for some short games with Redmond, or maybe motioning Jamari Johnson into the slot and then having him be a giant body coming across the middle on a drag or in a mesh concept or something like that to get him the ball, then yes, let's do that. Let's get the ball in our best players' hands, because that's how you're going to beat these damn good teams we have coming up.
It's going to take a lot, all hands on deck to try to beat Miami, to try to beat Clemson coming up, to try to beat Boston College on the road on a Friday night. But one thing's for certain, there need to be some answers as it relates to defending mobile quarterbacks. And through the first half of the season, there hasn't been. Coming up, we'll discuss how Louisville, once again, wasn't able to contain a quarterback that had legs that can get him upfield. Coming up on the next segment of Locked on Louisville. When you're hiring for your when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. It's not just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're in the wrong spot. 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Continuing on along on this Monday edition of the Locked on Louisville podcast with Keith Artuoff, producer of From the Pink Seats podcast. And I feel like I'm sliding you when I say producer, because Keith is fantastic on that show. It's a really good show throughout the football season to really get all of your, intricate X's and O's detail. Him, Vince Lococo, Jacob Lane, Matt McGavick, a bunch of great people on that show. Keith, as we talk about a not so great portion of this Louisville defense, one that continues to consistently not be good. Even when you factor in 3 sacks that Louisville had, Anthony Calandria had 15 carries for just about 90 yards. He had 30 of those on the first drive, where, stop me if you've heard this before, the Cardinals allowed a 75-yard touchdown drive, basically unopposed, through the first portion or through the first drive of the games. What's the main problem, in your opinion? What is Louisville doing or not doing to ensure that they're not being able to defend mobile quarterbacks?
So when you're trying to contain a mobile quarterback, it comes down to really 2 primary factors. Your edge rushers, make sure they have discipline on contain on the edges, getting as deep as the deepest man in the backfield before trying to collapse in on the pocket. And then your linebackers having the eyes and the awareness to follow and make plays and track things. And we've seen failings in both of those aspects throughout the course of the season. That first drive that you mentioned with Calandria, more so on the linebacker side than on the edge rusher side. So you have your 2 starting linebackers, one of which a redshirt freshman who you expect to see making mistakes like that. But then your other linebacker, TJ Quinn, is also continuing to make these mental mistakes, and it's really putting the defense in some tough situations.
I also feel like at times, especially in the second half of that Virginia game, and this happened a couple times in the SMU game, the edge rushers seem to be getting a little bit too far upfield. And even when they're trying to prevent the quarterback from getting through that gap, it's like more often than not, Louisville's just not really capitalizing on tackling. Like tackling's been an issue for this team this season, which is so wild because through the first 9 games of the year last year, it was not.
Yeah, it's really, I'm curious what happened because defense was one of the sides of the ball where we thought we were going to have at least a little bit more continuity than almost the complete roster turnover we saw on the offensive side. But yeah, just the tackling has not been great this year. And also to give them a little leniency, we've gone against 4 really good running quarterbacks in 4 consecutive weeks. So like just high level competition, sometimes you're going to get got. But at some point, the rubber has to meet the road and you got to figure it out.
You know what I find very interesting is that Louisville is still really good at defending the traditional running back. Like their run defense for the most part, outside of maybe that Notre Dame game, because Notre Dame has a really good rushing attack. But Jamal Haynes for Georgia Tech really didn't have all that great of a game. Brashard Smith last week for SMU. Kobe Pace this week had less than 4 yards per carry, had like 10 for 38. Like Louisville's doing a good job of, sort of squeezing the opposing offense's rushing attack. It's more so the discipline, I feel like, when plays break down. And maybe some of that has to do with trying to simplify things a little bit more. Ron English was on the field calling plays this week, and they gave up 20 points. Like, it's not like they were terrible, but still 450 yards and the quarterback ran for 90. So,
yeah, I mean, it's a weird situation with this defense because a lot of the wounds we've taken this year have been fixable, self-inflicted things like running a player onto the field when there's 10 seconds left on the play clock and the offense is about to snap it. So you either have to burn a timeout or eat a 12-min on the field penalty and give the offense a free play. And like even on the passing side of things, when you see how this defense has gotten beat, a lot of it's not just, dang, their guy went out and got that. I say that after Malachi Fields just gave our D-backs some daddy treatment, but it's breakdowns when plays are able to get extended, when players escape from the pocket and can extend plays and then find guys downfield. Like we're fantastic for 3 to 4 seconds, but when things break down, we break down fast.
And I look on this roster and, some of it might be personnel based. A lot of it's probably scheme based. One guy that I know he's been banged up, but one guy that I would love the coaching staff to give an opportunity to because he's fantastic when it comes to the athleticism aspect of things is TJ Capers. And he's a guy that we had talked about before the show as one that both of us really kind of want to see what he has in store, because at this point, you've got to try something because whatever you're doing isn't working. And guess what? You also have got Cam Ward coming up this week. You've got Thomas Castellanos next week. In 4 weeks, you have Cade Klubnik. And Cade Klubnik 3 weeks. Cade Klubnik was like the top ACC rusher in quarterbacks for like the past 3 weeks. This isn't going to get any easier, Keith. In fact, it's probably going to get more challenging.
Yeah, I would love to see that as well. At least experiment with the personnel, because it's not like you're saving a red shirt for anything. Like he used it last season. He doesn't have another one to give unless last year they wrote off as a med shirt and he still has a traditional one to use. But even then, you got 4 games. If I recall correctly, so far he's only played in Austin Peay and maybe Jacksonville State, if I remember correctly. So
I think he got hurt against Jacksonville State, if I'm not mistaken, but that is something that hopefully we'll get some clarification on as we move forward. But who knows?
Go
ahead.
I was going to say, you've got at least 2 games to use as a trial period. And if the defense operates better with him on the field, then what's the point of redshirting? Like, get him out there and play to try and win games.
I mean, let's say it. At this point, bowl eligibility is not a for certain. It's not.
It's not an easy road for us, which it's a weird season because there's some ends of the fan base who are like, no, we could still win 9 or 10 games. And I'm on the other camp like, 6 or 7 wins sure would be great.
I was in the thought process that if you lose to Virginia, it's time to panic.
Oh, 100%.
That's where I'm at. And the only thing stopping me from panicking about this performance is that they got the win. And hopefully they've got some tricks up their sleeve for the Miami Hurricanes when they come to town. All hands are going to have to be on deck. And Jeff Brom's going to have to put together a masterful scheming performance of play calling. And we'll talk about some of the play calling issues that have happened coming up on the next segment of Locked On Louisville. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is your official ticket marketplace for all of your sports, theater, music, comedy events near you. I can't wait for basketball season. And no, I know what you're thinking. It's not because of the football struggles. Look, Pat Kelsey's got me really excited about Louisville basketball for the first time in a couple of seasons. And Game Time will be my go-to place for all of my ticketing needs because when I downloaded the app, it was over. It was absolutely over. The all-in pricing feature that you can toggle, which will eliminate all the surprise fees. Or what about the panoramic view from your seat? Not to mention the great ticket insurance coverage and protection guarantee, and then the lowest price guarantee, which basically means if you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. All you have to do is take the guesswork out of buying tickets. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. And into the final segment of this Monday edition of the show. Thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the show free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week. Your team every day. Keith Artuoff. I need to come up with a nickname for Keith. I have one for Grant Mulligan. G Money is my go-to there. I need to get a nickname for Keith going. If you have any suggestions, drop them in the YouTube comments below. But in terms of suggestions, everyone seems to have suggestions about what Jeff Brom is doing or not doing. And the main thing that has been talked about is whether or not his play calling is like that of a vintage Jeff Brom offense. That is a topic that you and I discussed last week. And unfortunately, it felt like this week was the most conservative the play calling has been in quite some time. Now, I know that there is a hypothetical that you want to introduce because it's been making me think for the past 20 minutes or so. I want you to lay out the question, how you presented it to me.
Okay, so it's a simple matter of this. Like normally when watching college football, one of the things that makes the game beautiful is all the different styles and schemes that you get to see all sorts of teams around the country play. And normally only the cream of the crop, elite of the elite teams are the ones that run a pro style offense. My hands are off screen, but I'm air quoting as I do the pro style there. So with the talent that Louisville not just has currently, but that traditionally recruits, is the team talented enough to run a pro style offense? Or, and this isn't something I would expect to see during a season, but over the course of an off season, should they try to shift styles to sort of accommodate for areas of weakness? Like, for example, this year, the offensive line, not necessarily the strongest unit, especially when compared to a lot of the competition we're playing. Okay, we could run a scheme similar to what you see with Rhett Lashley and SMU. a lot of shotgun, a lot of motion, a lot of quick hitting plays to get the ball out fast so you don't have to rely on the offensive line to hold on, and a lot of like read option run game or RPO scheming just to optimize performance. Or you could take a different approach where you try to play like that team down the road to the east, where you just try to suffocate the ball and squeeze the life out of every game, limit possessions, and just Virginia basketball as an equivalent. You just slow this game down and you play on your terms. So I posed the question before the show and wanted to give you a little time while we talk to think about it. Is this team talented enough to get away with running the stereotypical balanced pro style offense? 20 minutes might not have been enough time.
It all comes down to the offensive line. If you had last year's offensive line, I think that the answer is yes. But if Jeff Brom is saying that we can't go as vertical as we want because protection we fear might not hold up, then you got to try things different. And to sort of further that point, that was Brom's bread and butter. It was a gimmicky offense, like you called it, and don't take that in a negative connotation. I'm basically just saying that you keep the defense on their heels and you complicate the shit out of things. And that's what he did at Purdue. That's why you see them beat the ranked teams in which they did, because he had everyone caught off balance. Western Kentucky was the same way. I don't want to speak for the fan base. Actually, screw it. I'll speak for the fan base. We want to see that. I want to see fun football. But more importantly, I want to win football games. And if squeezing the life out of the football works, then, I won't love it. But if we win games, who am I to disagree? But there comes a point to where I think you have to – I don't know if this is Jeff Brom thinking, well, I've got better athletes now. I can run the more pro-style offense. You can run your regular offense that we've known you to run with these players, and I think you would then give yourself even more of an advantage, especially since you're going to face some damn good defenses coming up here in the next couple months, to where I think you have to try something different because your defense isn't good enough, and right now your offense isn't explosive enough to win a shootout game, which is weird because we thought coming into the season that, if we get in a shootout, Louisville's going to blow teams away. It's not been that way.
Yeah, well, it's also been partially due to the fact, like, our games have been very weird when it comes to tempo. Like we talked about a little bit earlier in the show, the last 4 games, like, our opponents have sort of squeezed the life out of the ball on us. So I don't want to say we're not explosive enough, because, like, we've seen huge plays from Ja'Cory Brooks throughout the course of the season. We darn near had 2 more of them against SMU. We had the one against Virginia where he breaks 2 tackles on the in route and then busts for another 40 yards downfield on a 60-yard pass. So it's just coming up with the creativity to open those plays up. And a lot of people assume when you say pro style that it's like one back or power I formation. We're going to run the football. Like, no.
Halfback toss and then run forward.
Like, hey, no, baby. It's a West Coast offense's world now. Like, you can set up the deep pass with the short pass, and we have not seen very many mesh concepts, drag concept. I don't think I've seen a single just hitch concept on a 3rd and short or on a 2nd and short this season. So those are schemes that you can draw up and you can run to bait defenses into pressing more forward, to running a cover 2 with some hard flat looks, or some cover 1, and you try to creep a safety up to be a robber across the middle. That's what takes the top off, so you can open things up downfield, so you can get the explosive plays that everyone in the fan base wants to see, because explosive plays are fun.
You know what? We need to bring back true power eye football. I'm going to give you 2 offensive coordinator options. You have to choose between one of them. Number 1, Les Miles.
Okay.
You remember that offensive?
Yeah.
Snap the ball, toss it back, and everybody just run forward. You, Odell and Jarvis Landry, doesn't matter. Run the ball up the middle. Number 2, Matt Canada of the Pittsburgh Steelers, who, again, toss the ball back, run the ball forward, and you better not have any creation in your offensive game plan. Of course, I'm being facetious, but I do agree. I like the way that you presented that, because we talked about tempo last week, and I think the tempo got a little bit better. You could see that Louisville went more so to the signs that they were holding up. It seemed like that was more of a point of emphasis to play a little bit faster. But I do think that incorporating some misdirection is the word that I'm trying to get at. I mean, I watched my Los Angeles Chargers yesterday, and it's me, you, Vince Lococo, and Grant Mulligan running routes. And Lad McConkey's out there as well. The Chargers do not have wide receivers, but I'll give credit to him. I didn't think I was ever going to do this, but I gave credit to Greg Roman for all the misdirection that he ran. And I'm like, what did you do with our offensive coordinator? And I think that that's a portion of scheming that Jeff Brom could include to make this offense more fun and even be more impressive, because they scored 24 points against Virginia. One of those was on a gift that the Virginia punter sent a ball into the mid-back section of one of his interior offensive linemen. But nonetheless, I digress. Sorry, I've got the hiccups. Louisville back in action. Saturday noon kickoff, L&N Cardinals Stadium. Miami Hurricanes are in town. Hopefully, when Keith and I come back on the show, we're throwing our U's down. Well, I think I did that right? We're just going to throw U's down. But that is going to wrap up this Monday edition of the show. Everyone have a great day. Have a great week. We'll see you right back here tomorrow.